My name is Eleanor, though folks around here just call me Grandma Ellie, and I've spent most of my 72 years under this Florida sun, living in the same little house where the walls have seen all my joys and sorrows. The paint is peeling now, and the shutters rattle when the wind blows, but this place has always been my safe corner in the world. Life here has been simple, sometimes hard, but filled with love, or at least it used to be, because love, once so full and overflowing, feels thinner these days, stretched across distance and silence that I never imagined would stand between me and my only child. My daughter was the light of my life, the reason I woke up each morning, the blessing that gave my struggles meaning. You see, I had her young, far younger than most. I was barely out of high school when I held her tiny body against my chest, scared and proud all at once. Her father didn't stick around. He left before she could even speak his name. I remember standing at the door, holding the baby in one arm and watching his car disappear down the road, knowing it was just me and her from that day forward. Some folks pitied me. Some whispered that I'd never manage, but I was determined to prove them wrong. I told myself every night, Ellie, this little girl is counting on you, and you're going to give her a life better than the one you had. So I worked. I worked harder than I thought possible. I cleaned houses, waited tables at the diner on Main Street, and took in sewing jobs at night by the glow of a weak lamp. My hands grew rough and calloused from scrubbing floors. My feet ached from long shifts on the linoleum, but none of that mattered when I came home and saw her smile. She was my reason, my reward. I remember patching her little dresses over and over because I couldn't afford new ones, but she never complained. She would twirl in front of the mirror, giggling like it was the finest dress in the world. There were times when I skipped my own meals just so she could eat. I'd sip water and tell her I wasn't hungry, even though my stomach growled in protest. But when I saw her little belly full and her eyes bright, it felt like a feast to me. As she grew, she turned out so smart, too smart for the small town. She would sit at the table with her books, her head bent down, and I would marvel at the way her mind worked. "Mama, one day I'm going to take care of you," she used to tell me, her little fingers brushing mine. I believed her with every part of my being. I held on to those words like a promise, like a lifeline when nights felt too long and bills felt too heavy. And oh, how proud I was when she got into college. Nobody in her family had ever made it that far, and I was determined that money would not stand in her way. I sold my old wedding ring, the one keepsake I had from her father who left, and I sold some of my mother's jewelry too. I never told my daughter how much I sacrificed, because I didn't want her to feel guilty. I just wanted her to fly. I packed her bags with my heart breaking quietly inside me, but also swelling with pride. When graduation day came, I sat in the crowd with tears running down my cheeks as I watched her walk across that stage in her cap and gown. My hands clapped until they stung, and my heart felt like it might burst. All those years of scrubbing and stitching and saving pennies had led to that moment, and it was worth every bit of struggle. She was stepping into a world bigger than I ever knew, and I told myself she'd never forget where she came from, never forget the mother who carried her on her back through the storm. After she started her job in the city, she used to call me often. At first, it was every day. She'd tell me about her work, her friends, her dreams. I'd sit on the porch with the phone pressed to my ear, rocking gently and smiling at the sound of her laughter. She sounded happy, and that was all I ever wanted for her. But slowly, the calls grew fewer. First, they went from daily to weekly, then from weekly to every other week. "Sorry, Mama," she'd say, "I'm just so busy." And I would swallow my disappointment and tell her it was fine, that I understood. Because isn't that what mothers do? We understand even when our hearts ache. I never wanted to be a burden. I never wanted to cling so tightly that she couldn't breathe. So I told myself she was just building her life, and I was proud of her for it. But deep down, I felt the distance growing like a shadow stretching between us. I prayed at night that she would always remember me, always know that no matter where life took her, her mama would be waiting with open arms and a warm kitchen. I thought love like ours could never be shaken. I thought the bond between mother and daughter was unbreakable, but I would soon learn how wrong I was. Because one ordinary Sunday afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the curtains and the clock ticked steady on the wall, I picked up the phone to call her. I dialed the familiar number with practiced fingers, expecting the ring, expecting her voice on the other end. But instead, I heard something else, something that made my heart drop into the pit of my stomach. A cold, mechanical voice told me, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." I froze. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe I'd pressed the wrong button. I hung up and dialed again, slower this time, careful. But the same voice repeated those same words. The number was no longer in service. My hands trembled, my heart raced. I tried a third time, a fourth, as if sheer will could force the line to connect. But it never did. That's when the realization began to creep in, a slow, icy dread that spread through me. My daughter had changed her number, and she hadn't told me. I sat there in the kitchen that Sunday afternoon, staring at the phone in my hand as if it might suddenly explain itself, as if maybe the message I kept hearing was some kind of mistake, but deep inside my heart, I already knew the truth, and I felt it pressing down on me like a heavy stone, squeezing the breath from my chest, because a mother knows when something is not right, and this was not right at all. For days I told myself it must be a problem with the phone company. Maybe her bill had not been paid, maybe there was a mix-up, so I kept trying over and over, my hand shaking as I pressed those familiar numbers, the same ones I had dialed for years, and each time that cold voice came back to me. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." And those words became like a hammer striking the same spot in my chest until I thought it might break apart. I went to bed with the sound of that voice in my ears. I woke up with it echoing in my head, and every hour in between I sat waiting, hoping the phone might ring, hoping she might remember to call her mama. But the house stayed quiet, so quiet I could hear the tick of the clock on the wall and the creak of the floorboards under my feet. I thought back to when she was little, when she used to run through this very house barefoot, her laughter filling every room, her tiny hands tugging at my dress as she asked for another story or begged for pancakes. And I wondered how that same little girl could grow into a woman who would leave her mother sitting by a silent phone. At first I tried to find excuses for her, because that is what mothers do, isn't it? We forgive before there is even an apology. We build reasons in our minds to protect the children we love. Maybe she had lost all her numbers when she got a new phone. Maybe she had been so busy she forgot to call. Maybe she planned to tell me, but it slipped her mind. I clung to those maybes like a drowning woman clings to driftwood, because the alternative, that she changed her number on purpose and decided I did not need to have it, was too painful to accept. But as the weeks passed and still no call came, the truth began to sink in deeper, like cold water seeping into my bones. I sat on the porch each evening, the Florida sun sinking low, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, and I would stare at the road as if maybe, just maybe, her car would appear and she would walk up the steps and say, "Mama, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you." But no car came, no knock at the door, only silence and the sound of crickets starting their song as darkness fell. I remember one evening the neighbor, Mrs. Carter, stopped by with a pie she had baked. She asked about my daughter, as she often did, and I smiled and told her, "Oh, she's fine, just busy with work," because I could not bring myself to admit the truth, not out loud. To say it out loud would make it real, and I was not ready to carry that kind of truth in my hands. After she left, I sat at the table staring at that pie, untouched, tears slipping down my face, because I had lied to protect myself from shame. What kind of mother raises a child who cuts her off without a word? That question circled in my mind like a bird with broken wings, never able to land, never able to rest. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made, the years of hard work, the hunger I had endured so she could eat, the nights I stayed awake sewing clothes until my eyes burned, all for her, all for that little girl I loved more than life itself. And I wondered if any of it had mattered. Did she ever remember those days, or had she erased them from her memory, the way she had erased my number from her phone? Sometimes I would pick up old photo albums and trace my fingers over the pictures of her as a child, the gap-toothed smile, the way her hair curled in the Florida humidity, the bright spark in her eyes when she was happy. I would hold those photographs against my chest and whisper her name, as if somehow she might feel it wherever she was. I prayed harder than I had prayed in years. I asked God to keep her safe, to protect her, and to soften her heart so she might come back to me. I wasn't angry at her, not really. I was hurt, I was broken, but beneath all of that was love. Love so strong it refused to die even when it was ignored. I remembered her words as a little girl. "Mama, one day I'm going to take care of you," and I wondered if she remembered them too. Did she ever think about the promises she made, the dreams she shared with me, or had she buried them under the noise of her new life? Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake listening to the hum of the ceiling fan, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling, and my mind would wander to all the possible reasons she had shut me out. Had I said something wrong? Had I asked for too much of her time? Or was it simply that she wanted to live a life without reminders of the sacrifices that had brought her there? A mother always blames herself, even when she doesn't deserve it. I replayed every conversation, every word, searching for the moment when things went wrong, but I could never find it. All I found was silence, heavy and cold, wrapping around me like a blanket I could not shake off. Yet, even in that silence, I refused to let go of hope. Every morning, I woke up, brewed my coffee, and set a cup on the table for her, just in case she walked through the door. It became a ritual, a quiet act of faith. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it made me look like a crazy old woman, but it gave me something to hold on to. Because deep down, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how many tears I shed, I still believed that one day she would come back to me. And until that day, I would wait. Because waiting is what mothers do when their children are lost, even if they are not lost in the world, but lost to their own hearts. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks slipped into months, yet the silence between me and my daughter only grew heavier, like a storm cloud that refused to move away, and I found myself clinging to the smallest scraps of hope as if they were lifelines, keeping me afloat in an ocean of loneliness. I remember how Sundays used to be our special day, the one day I could always count on hearing her voice, even if just for a few minutes. And so every Sunday I still picked up the phone, dialing those numbers out of habit, knowing deep down that it would not work, but unable to stop myself. As if maybe, by some miracle, the line would connect and she would answer with her soft, "Hi, Mama," the way she used to, and everything would be all right again. But each time the same cold recording filled the air, reminding me that the number was no longer in service, and my heart broke all over again. I would set the phone back on the counter, my hands trembling, and I would sit at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me, remembering how she once sat there with her homework spread out, asking me questions about spelling or math, her little brow furrowed in concentration while I made her peanut butter sandwiches. I wondered if she ever thought back on those moments, or if they were buried so far beneath her busy life that she had forgotten them entirely. I could not understand how a bond so deep, so full of love, could unravel to this point, where a mother no longer knew how to reach her own child. I began to notice how the silence changed me. My neighbors would wave from across the street, but I found myself smiling less. The garden I used to tend with care grew wild, weeds sprouting up around the flowers because I no longer had the heart to kneel down and pull them. Even the porch swing, once a place of comfort where I would sip tea and talk to my daughter for hours, now felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I sat there sometimes, rocking gently, staring at the road that led away from my house, and I wondered if she ever thought about coming back down it. Did she ever miss the smell of the orange blossoms in the spring? Did she remember how we used to chase fireflies in the summer evenings, her little hands cupped tight around the glowing light before she let it fly away? Those memories played in my mind like an old movie I could never turn off, and they made the silence hurt even more. Sometimes at church people would ask about her, and I always answered the same way. She's doing fine, just busy. It became my script, the words rolling off my tongue even as my heart ached with the lie. I didn't want to face their pity. I didn't want to hear anyone whisper that maybe she didn't want me anymore. So I carried the truth quietly, like a secret burden pressed into my chest, too heavy to share. After service, I would sit in the pew long after everyone had left, staring at the stained glass windows as the sunlight poured through in colors of red, blue, and gold, and I prayed. I prayed harder than I had ever prayed before. I asked God to guide her, to remind her of her mama waiting here, to soften her heart so she might reach out again. I told God that even if I never got to see her again, I just wanted her to be safe and happy. Because that is the strange thing about a mother's love. It hurts, it breaks, but it never stops wishing the best for the child who causes the pain. At night, I started talking out loud to her as if she were there. I would sit at the table or lie in bed and whisper, "Good night, baby girl, I love you," just like I used to when she lived under this roof. It might sound foolish to anyone else, but it gave me comfort, imagining that somewhere, maybe her heart could still feel the tug of mine. I told her about the little things, about how the roses in the yard finally bloomed again, about how the neighbor's dog had puppies, about how the weather was changing. I pretended we were still having our talks, even if it was only me speaking into the quiet air. It was the only way I knew how to keep her close when she felt so far away. As time went on, people around me began to notice my sadness. Mrs. Carter would sometimes bring me soup or pies, and though I appreciated her kindness, it made me feel even lonelier because the one person I wanted to share those meals with was not there. My sister called from Georgia and asked why I sounded so tired, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth either. I felt ashamed, as if my daughter's distance was somehow my fault, a reflection of my failures as a mother. Had I loved her too much, smothered her, made her feel trapped? Or had I not loved her enough, left some hole in her heart that she tried to fill by cutting me out? The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers, only pain. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold, I sat outside with a photo album on my lap. I flipped through the pages slowly, each picture a reminder of what once was. There she was on her first day of school, her hair tied up with ribbons, holding my hand tightly. There she was blowing out candles on her 10th birthday cake, her smile wide and full of joy. There she was at prom, looking so grown up it made me cry even then. And there she was at graduation, cap and gown, my pride shining brighter than the sun. I traced my fingers over her face in each picture, whispering, Where are you, baby girl? Don't you remember me? The tears fell freely that night, soaking the pages until the images blurred, and I held the album to my chest like a lifeline. Still, through all of it, I clung to hope. I told myself that maybe she just needed time. Maybe she would come back when she was ready, when the weight of the world reminded her of the love she once had here at home. I imagined her walking up the porch steps, her arms open, saying, "Mama, I missed you." And I held on to that dream like a candle in the dark. Because even though my daughter had changed her number without telling me, even though she had shut me out of her world, she could never erase the love I carried for her and mine. And so I kept waiting and I kept loving, because that is what mothers do. At first, when I realized my daughter had changed her number without telling me, I panicked, because my mind rushed to every terrible possibility. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe something bad had happened. Maybe she needed me and I had no way of reaching her, and that thought alone nearly drove me out of my senses. So I sat by the phone every day for weeks hoping it would ring and somehow connect me back to her. But the silence was all I ever heard. As the days passed, I had to admit to myself that it was not an accident, not a mistake. She had made a choice to change her number and not give it to me. And that truth was like swallowing a stone that would not go down. It just sat heavy in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I tried to find other ways to feel close to her. I wrote letters, though I did not know if they would ever reach her. I mailed birthday cards and Christmas cards to her old address, just in case. I even tucked in little notes telling her that Mama loved her no matter what. But none of them came back to me, which meant maybe she got them or maybe they just disappeared into the world. I never knew. The not knowing was the hardest part, because if she had written me even a single line saying, "Mama, I need space. Mama, I don't want to talk right now," I would have respected it. I would have given her the distance she asked for. But the silence left me with nothing, no explanation, no closure, just emptiness. I remember one evening I sat at the table staring at the old phone, the one that had served me faithfully for years, and I thought about all the times it used to bring me joy, how I would rush to answer it when I saw her name on the screen, how her voice on the other end could lift the heaviest day, and now it just sat there, a reminder of absence, a reminder that the one person I wanted to hear from had decided I wasn't worth a call. It hurt in a way that's hard to explain, like losing someone who is still alive, like grieving a living soul. I found myself wandering around the house at night, touching the objects that reminded me of her. The quilt I had stitched for her when she was a child, the little ceramic cup she painted for me in school, the photo frames with her smiling face frozen in time, and I would whisper to them as if they could carry my words across the distance. I don't know if people realize how much space silence can take up, but it filled every corner of my house. It climbed into bed with me at night. It followed me into the kitchen in the morning. It wrapped around me like a heavy blanket I could not throw off. Sometimes I wondered if she was angry with me for something, if there was a wound I had caused without knowing, maybe a word I had spoken too sharply, maybe a piece of advice she didn't want to hear, maybe my love felt like a chain to her instead of a gift. I replayed years of conversations in my head, searching for the moment when things shifted, but it was like chasing shadows. I could never catch the answer. And the more I searched, the more I blamed myself. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We take the blame because the thought of putting it on our children feels unbearable. My heart told me I must have failed her somehow, because why else would a daughter cut off her own mama? I tried to keep living, I really did. I kept going to church, kept baking pies for the Sunday socials, kept smiling when people asked about her, but inside I was breaking. I started to dread the questions, the casual, "How's your daughter these days?" because each time I had to paste on a smile and say, "Oh, she's fine, she's just busy with work." And each time I said it, my throat burned because it wasn't the truth. The truth was that I didn't know how she was. I didn't know if she was eating well, if she was sleeping enough, if she was happy, if she was lonely. I didn't know if she thought of me at all. That not knowing gnawed at me night after night, until even my dreams became haunted with her absence. One night I dreamed she was still little, no more than 6 or 7, and she came running into my arms saying, "Mama, I'm scared," and I held her close, telling her everything was all right. When I woke up, the ache of that dream stayed with me, because in real life I couldn't hold her, I couldn't comfort her, I couldn't even reach her. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried until the morning light crept in through the curtains, and even then I didn't feel lighter. My body felt older than ever, my back stiff, my knees sore, and my heart carrying a weight that no doctor could heal. Still, in spite of all the hurt, my love for her never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, because love doesn't vanish just because it isn't returned. Some people might say I should let go, that if she didn't want me in her life, I should move on. But how does a mother move on from her own child? It isn't possible. She is the first face I saw every morning for years, the last thought I had before sleep, the reason I worked myself to the bone, the reason I survived hardships. How do you erase that? You don't. You carry it even when it's heavy, even when it cuts into you like glass. You carry it because it's yours, because she's yours. So I kept waiting. Every day I waited. Even if I told myself I wasn't, even if I pretended to be busy with chores or gardening or church events, the truth was I was always waiting. Waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the mail to bring me a letter, waiting for the sound of her footsteps on the porch. And maybe that's foolish, maybe it makes me stubborn or naive, but I believe and hope the way I believe in God. Hope keeps me alive. And even though my daughter had changed her number without telling me, even though she had built a wall of silence between us, I held on to the hope that one day, somehow, she would remember her mama sitting here in Florida, still loving her, still waiting, still ready to forgive with open arms. The days began to blur together after a while, one long stretch of quiet mornings and lonely nights, and though I tried to fill my time with small tasks, cooking, sweeping, folding laundry, watering the plants, it all felt empty without my daughter's voice on the other end of the phone. I would sit in my rocking chair on the porch, watching the Florida sky shift from pale blue to golden orange as the sun dipped low, and I would think about her, wondering what she was doing at that very moment, if she was also watching the sky, if she was laughing with friends, if she was sitting at her own table having dinner, and the thought that she could live her whole life without needing me any more cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. I remembered when she was little, and I was her whole world, the person she ran to when she was hurt, the one she cried for in the night, and now it felt like I had been erased, like the pages of our story had been torn out of her book. I kept asking myself over and over, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail her? Because surely if I had been the mother she needed, she would not have shut me out so completely. She would not have felt the need to change her number without telling me. Mothers are supposed to protect, to nurture, to guide. But what if all my sacrifices had not been enough? What if I had loved her in the wrong way? What if my care had somehow turned into a burden she wanted to escape? The questions circled endlessly in my mind, and with each passing day they weighed heavier on my heart. I tried writing to her again, letters filled with memories and gentle words, reminding her that no matter what had happened, no matter how much time had passed, her mama loved her and would always be here. But I never got a reply. I slipped in pictures sometimes, old ones of her childhood, hoping they might spark something in her heart, a flicker of memory that would remind her of our bond. But silence was the only answer I received. The mailbox became another place of disappointment, and I began to dread opening it because every day it held nothing but bills and advertisements, never the one letter I was praying for. I sent packages too, little care boxes with homemade cookies or crocheted scarves. But I never knew if they reached her, never knew if she held them in her hands or if they ended up discarded somewhere without a thought. And still, even with all the silence, I could not stop trying because giving up felt impossible. A mother doesn't stop reaching, not until her last breath. At church one Sunday, the pastor spoke about forgiveness, about how sometimes we have to forgive even when no apology is given, even when we do not understand the reasons behind the hurt. His words sank deep into me, and I sat there with my hands folded tightly in my lap, thinking about my daughter. Maybe she felt I had wronged her in some way I didn't realize. Maybe she carried wounds I could not see, and maybe her silence was her way of protecting herself. If that was the case, then I needed to forgive, not just for her, but for myself, because holding on to anger would only poison me. And so, that night, I whispered a prayer of forgiveness. I said, "Lord, I forgive her, whatever the reason, whatever the hurt, I forgive her, and I still love her." And though my heart still ached, I felt a small release, like a knot loosening, like a tiny bit of the weight lifting off my shoulders. But forgiveness did not erase the loneliness. Nights still stretched long, the bed beside me cold and empty, the silence pressing down heavier than the blankets. I often dreamed of her, vivid dreams where she walked through the front door, smiling like she used to, her voice calling out, "Mama, I'm home." I would wake up with tears in my eyes, the dream fading into the dark room, the reality hitting harder each time. It felt cruel, how the mind can trick you into believing for a moment that everything is okay, only to snatch it away when you open your eyes. I began to fear that I might never see her again, that the silence would stretch on forever until one day my time on this earth was up and she never even knew that her mama had been waiting all along. Still, I found little ways to hold on to her. I kept her old room just the way it was, the posters still on the walls, the books still on the shelves, the quilt folded neatly on the bed. Some people told me I should pack it up, move on, but I couldn't. Walking into that room gave me comfort, as if a part of her still lingered there, as if I could still feel her presence. Sometimes I would sit on the edge of her bed and talk out loud, telling her about my day, telling her how much I missed her, pretending she was just in the other room listening. It might have looked strange to anyone else, but to me it was survival. It was how I kept from breaking completely. There were moments when anger flared too, I won't deny it. Moments when I clenched my fists and thought, how could she do this to me? After everything I gave, after all the nights I went hungry so she could eat, after all the years of sacrifice. But the anger never lasted long, because love would always rise stronger, washing over the bitterness like a tide. She is my daughter, my only child, my heart. No matter what she did, no matter how far she went, no matter how much she shut me out, I could never stop loving her. Love is not a switch you turn off. It is a river that keeps flowing, even when the banks are cracked and dry. And so I waited. I waited through birthdays and holidays, through stormy nights and sunny days, through moments of hope and waves of despair. I waited because that is what mothers do. They wait with open arms, with hearts that refuse to quit, with love that refuses to die. And though my daughter had changed her number without telling me, though she had chosen silence instead of connection, I still believed, deep in my bones, that one day she would remember me. One day she would find her way back. And when she did, I would be here, the door unlocked, the light on, ready to welcome her home. Time has a strange way of moving when you are waiting for something that may never come. Some days felt like they dragged on endlessly, while others slipped past without me even realizing it. But through it all, the ache in my chest remained the same, steady and heavy like a stone I carried everywhere I went. And though I tried to hide it from others, the loneliness always found a way to show itself in the lines on my face, in the slowness of my step, in the distant look in my eyes when someone asked how I was doing. I became good at smiling politely and saying, "I'm fine," even when inside I was anything but fine, because how do you explain to someone that your own child has vanished from your life by choice, that she changed her number without a word and left you standing on the other side of silence? I began to notice little things about myself that I hadn't before, how I listened for the phone even when I knew it wouldn't ring, how my hands reached automatically for the receiver out of habit, how I rehearsed conversations in my mind as if preparing for the moment she might finally call, imagining what I would say, how I would sound calm and not desperate, how I would tell her I loved her without overwhelming her. But of course those conversations never left my imagination. I joined a small community group at the library, mostly other older folks like me, and though they talked about their children and grandchildren with such pride and joy, I often found myself sitting quietly, forcing a smile, nodding along while my heart cracked inside. Sometimes someone would ask about my daughter, and I would swallow the lump in my throat and say, "Oh, she's busy these days, working hard," because it was easier to tell a gentle lie than to explain the truth that I had been cut off without explanation. I found comfort in small things, like the sound of birds singing outside my window in the morning, or the way the ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and pine through the neighborhood. I would sit with a cup of tea and watch the waves crash in my mind, remembering the many times I had taken my daughter to the beach when she was little, how she used to run into the water with her arms wide, laughing as if the sea belonged to her, how I would chase after her, afraid she might go too far, yet unable to stop smiling at the joy on her face. Those memories became my lifeline, something to hold on to when the silence of her absence became unbearable, and I would close my eyes and whisper to myself, "She was happy once, she loved me once, that is real, that cannot be erased." But then the doubt would creep back in, whispering that maybe she had outgrown me, maybe she no longer needed or wanted me. Maybe the bond one held on to so tightly was no longer alive in her heart. Those thoughts cut me deeper than any knife, but still I refused to let them take root completely, because hope, fragile as it was, still lived in me. Sometimes I would dream not only of her return, but of the life we could still have together if she came back. I pictured us sitting at the kitchen table again, sharing coffee, walking through the grocery store like we used to, her laughing at my habit of picking up fruits and knocking on them to test if they were ripe. I even imagined us celebrating birthdays again with a simple cake and candles. Just the two of us, the way we always had. Those daydreams kept me company when reality felt too heavy, and though some people might call it foolish to hold on to what may never happen, I think a mother's heart is built differently. It clings even when logic says to let go. It hopes even when the odds are slim. It loves even when love is not returned. There were moments, though, when my body betrayed me, moments when the weight of grief became too much and I would find myself weeping into my pillow late at night, muffling my sobs so the neighbors wouldn't hear, my hand shaking as I whispered her name into the dark. It felt like mourning, though she was not dead, mourning the living, mourning the loss of connection. And in some ways that was harder because there was no final goodbye, no closure, only a wound that refused to heal. I would look at her pictures, the ones framed on my shelves, her graduation photo, her wedding day, even the little school portraits where she had missing teeth and messy hair, and I would talk to them as if she could hear me, saying things like, "I'm proud of you," or "I'm still here," or simply, "I love you." It may sound strange, but those conversations with her photographs gave me a sense of closeness, a thread to hold on to when everything else felt cut. The seasons changed, summer slipping into fall, fall into winter, and though Florida doesn't carry the heavy snow and icy winds of other states, there is still a shift. The air grows cooler, the evenings darker sooner, and I found that the holidays were the hardest of all. Thanksgiving came with its empty chair, Christmas arrived with no call, no visit, no sign of her, and the loneliness of those days weighed heavier than ever. I decorated the tree anyway, hanging the same ornaments we had used when she was small, the little handmade ones she crafted in school, crooked stars and painted bells, and I placed them gently on the branches as if she might walk through the door and see them. I cooked a small meal too, though there was no one to share it with, because traditions felt sacred to me, and abandoning them would feel like abandoning the hope of her return. Sometimes I wondered if she was thinking of me during those holidays, if she ever felt the pull of memory, if she missed me even just a little. The not knowing was its own kind of torment, because the silence left so much space for questions, for doubts, for fears. I often thought if only I could hear her voice once, even for a minute, even if it was just to say she was fine, that would be enough to ease my heart. But the phone never rang. Yet still, through it all, I held on to the belief that one day something would change. Maybe she would have a change of heart. Maybe life would push her back toward me. Maybe she would realize that no matter what had happened, no matter what distance had grown between us, I was still her mother, and I would always love her. That belief was the thread that kept me moving forward, one step at a time, one day at a time, even through the silence. It was a quiet morning when the change finally came, not with any grand sign or dramatic moment, but in the simple sound of the phone ringing. And at first I didn't believe it was for me, because the phone had sat silent for so long that the ring startled me, my heart leaping into my throat as I rushed across the room with trembling hands. And when I picked it up and heard her voice say softly, "Hi, Mom," I nearly collapsed with relief, tears spilling down my cheeks faster than I could wipe them, my words tumbling out clumsy and broken. "Is it really you? Are you all right? Do you know how much I've missed you?" And though my heart raced with questions, I forced myself to be calm because I didn't want to scare her away with my desperation. She explained slowly, haltingly, that life had become overwhelming for her, that she had been drowning in stress, responsibilities, and feelings she didn't know how to handle, and in her confusion she had pulled away from everyone, even me, by changing her number and closing herself off, not because she didn't love me, but because she didn't know how to cope. I listened, nodding though she couldn't see me, my tears soaking the collar of my nightgown, and when she paused, I said the only thing that truly mattered: "You are my daughter, and no matter what happens, I love you. Nothing can change that." She broke down then, sobbing into the receiver, and for the first time in years we wept together, our cries weaving through the line like a bridge rebuilding itself after a long collapse. We talked for hours that day, sharing memories, apologies, and promises, and though there were still unanswered questions and hurts to mend, what mattered most was that the door was open again. In the days that followed, she began calling more often, sometimes just for a few minutes on her way to work, sometimes longer when she had time to sit quietly, and each call felt like a gift I had waited years to receive. I didn't press her for explanations or demand to know why she had shut me out, because I realized that what was broken didn't need to be dissected to be healed. It simply needed love, patience, and understanding. I took joy in hearing the little things about her life, the new job she had started, the book she was reading, the meals she was cooking, and I share my own simple days with her, telling her about the garden, the weather, the neighbor's new dog who barked at everything. These conversations may have seemed ordinary to others, but to me they were extraordinary, a resurrection of a bond one had feared was gone forever. When she finally came to visit, it felt like the sun itself had stepped into my home. I opened the door and there she was, standing with her arms full of flowers, her eyes red from tears but shining with love. And in that moment, I didn't see the years of silence between us. I only saw my little girl again, the child I had rocked to sleep, the teenager I had encouraged through exams, the young woman I had hugged at her graduation. And I pulled her into my arms and held her as tightly as my old. Bones allowed. We sat for hours in the kitchen, eating, laughing, and sometimes crying, and she told me how guilty she had felt for pushing me away, how ashamed she was of the pain she had caused. But I hushed her with a smile and said, "We can't change the past, but we can build the future, and that is enough." From that day on, things slowly but surely grew brighter, not perfect, but real, and real is what I had prayed for all those lonely nights. The holidays no longer passed in silence, the phone no longer sat gathering dust, and the house felt alive again with the sound of her voice echoing through its rooms. We returned to our traditions, decorating the tree together, baking cookies like we used to, walking by the ocean and letting the waves wash over our feet while we talked about everything and nothing. I realized that sometimes love has to withstand storms. Sometimes it gets tested in ways that feel unbearable. But if it is true and deep, it survives, it bends but does not break. It waits until the lost find their way home again. I learned that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a strength, a gift you give not only to the other person, but to yourself, because holding on to bitterness only deepens the wound while letting go allows healing to begin. Now, when I sit on my porch swing and watch the Florida sun dip into the horizon, I no longer feel the same hollow emptiness I once carried. Instead, I feel gratitude, pure and steady, for the chance to hold my daughter again, to hear her call me Mom, to be part of her life once more. I know there may still be days of struggle, moments of distance, times when she gets lost in her own world again. But I also know that we have walked through the fire and come out the other side, and that gives me courage to face whatever comes next. Life has taught me that love is not about perfection or constant closeness, but about choosing to stay even after mistakes, about opening the door again and again, about saying, "I'm here," no matter how much time has passed. And that is what I will always do for my daughter, because she is my heart, my reason, my forever child. So if you ask me now about my story, I will tell you this. My daughter once changed her number without telling me, and it broke me in ways I cannot describe, but love has a way of finding its way back through even the darkest silence. And though the years apart hurt, they also taught me the strength of a mother's heart, the power of forgiveness, and the beauty of reunion. I am not bitter anymore. I am grateful that I lived long enough to see the day she came back, grateful that I never gave up, grateful that hope kept me alive when despair tried to bury me. And as I rock on my porch with the sound of the ocean breeze whispering through the palms, I hold this truth close to my chest. Love never truly disappears. It waits, it endures, and when the time is right, it comes home.